Welcome, everybody. We're very excited today to have Dr. Deborah King from Ithaca College to present for our brown bag series in science. The point of this brown bag series is just to introduce our students and our staff to the really broad, diverse range of work that our members do. So we like to keep these sort of informal and just have a nice discussion with our presenting member. We're really thrilled that we have some students joining us today from all around. And we have some ACSM staff here in our national office that are also involved here in the webinar and joining in. Dr. King has a PhD in biomechanics, and she's a professor in the Department of Exercise and Sports Sciences at Ithaca College. She started her work in figure skating in 1993 and has pretty much been doing it since. So today she's going to talk to us about the biomechanics of figure skating, some of the work that she's been doing. We'll have time at the end for questions. If you have questions, just go ahead and type them into the chat question box. We'll be sure to leave some time at the end for that, and I'll moderate a question session. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Lynette Kraft. I'm the Chief Science Officer. I'm here in the National Office at ACSM. And with that, we'll welcome Dr. King and turn it over to her.
Okay, great, thanks. So I have, feel free to interrupt and potentially, I don't know, as questions are coming in, I know you're typing them in. If you want to interrupt me and ask a question then rather than the end, that's okay. So I have sort of an outline of what I'd like to do, if I can get my computer working. But we don't have to go over all of this, so I might sort of pick and choose. I want to be sure we have time to answer questions. But I thought I should start, since I am in biomechanics, what sort of I do and what sports biomechanics is. And specifically, I do biomechanics of figure skating, but I want to just give a little more what sports biomechanics is in general. And then talk was, I think, probably most exciting, given that the Olympics are coming up and a lot of people are going to be watching figure skating at the very elite level, sort of biomechanics of some of the jumps, and answer questions that I get all the time, which are knowing the biomechanics of a jumps and what skaters are doing. Is there any chance that we'll ever see a skater do a quint? And I'll explain what that is if those of you don't follow figure skating. And also look at, sort of from an injury and sports medicine perspective, all these jumps that the skaters are doing. What's the toll on the skater's body? And is there anything we could do maybe to reduce it? So first, just to give you an idea, sports biomechanics and biomechanics, we study the forces acting on the human body if we're doing human movement biomechanics, and sort of the results of those forces. So what are the consequences in terms of how our tissues are being loaded? We also look at how are the forces developed in terms of not just your muscles producing force, but how you can change your technique or how your movement patterns might affect the forces that you can create, and how that's going to affect your performance, or how your movement patterns and your muscle actions affect the way your body's absorbing loading, and how that's affecting the load on the different structures, be it your muscles or your tendons, bones, ligaments. So we sort of have two perspectives going on generally in sports biomechanics. One looking at sort of how you put the biomechanics together, the athlete puts their biomechanics together to create a performance, an optimized performance. This could be an elite athlete, or it could be just optimizing functioning in someone with a disability or disorder. And then we have the how could we prevent injury side of biomechanics, and they often go hand in hand. So I've been working in figure skating biomechanics since the early 90s. I sort of do projects, every few years, working with US figure skating, usually trying to answer some sort of what are their main questions, to sort of depending on where they are in their sort of Olympic style and Olympic cycle, and where their sport has advanced in different techniques. So help them out and sort of what are their burning questions in figure skating. I help them out in answering those types of questions. So to set the stage, I have primarily looked at biomechanics of jumps, and it's helpful to know a little bit about figure skating to follow along. And I didn't know what everyone's background was going to be. So I have a few key points in figure skating that I'm going to go over. If I need to not go over this, someone needs to flag me down and tell me not to. So just to let you know, the first triple jump. So when you're watching figure skating, all the skaters, ladies, men, pairs, will be doing triple jumps. And skaters have been doing triple jumps since 1952 by Dick Button in the Oslo Winter Olympics. So they've been around for a long time, and we still are doing triple jumps. Now we're also doing, I'm not a skater, by the way. So figure skaters are now also doing quad jumps, but this is the first ever that you're seeing. It's really poor resolution, but it's 1952 triple jump done in a competition down there on the right-hand side. Other thing you need to know about figure skating is that figure skaters no longer skate figures. And a lot of people don't know that, but it used to be before the 1990s that in addition to the programs that you see on TV, the figure skaters also met on the ice and they were judged. This is, you're seeing this right now. This was part of the Olympic figure skating competition before the 1990s. They had to trace a pattern. It's not drawn on the ice. They had to recreate a pattern based on all their practicing. And they were judged based on how well they created the standard pattern. And this was part of their overall score. So they would get a score in their figures. They would get a score from their short program. They would get a score from their free skate or long program. And the winner would have to do well generally in all three parts of the competition. Starting in the 1990s, they took this part of the competition out. So it's now all the programs or the presentations that we see on the broadcast. So the short program, the free skate. And this is important because it changed the way skaters practice. They now spend more time on technical elements. They spend a lot more time jumping and landing with forces acting on their body, and they might not get as much practice in the finer control of actually controlling the blade and skating figure. So it's really changed sort of the balance of the training that needs to take place in this sport. And it also then has had effect on some of the injuries we see in figure skating. Like I said, people now do quads. You're seeing quads in the men's competitions, and this was the one of the first quads ever done in competition. But quads have been around actually since the 80s, but they really took off in the 2000s. And a quad is any jump that's 4 revolutions. Other really important piece of information for figure skating is 2002 Salt Lake Olympics. There was a judging scandal. And some judges got bought off, essentially, is long story short. The important part of this is that figure skating changed the scoring system. And the scoring system used to be a 6.0 system, depending on how old you are familiar with that, or you're not familiar with that if you watch figure skating. And they went to a system that's probably a little more like gymnastics, but it has a lot of unique characteristics to it. And you don't need to know the new judging system too much, but I just put this up. This is what a score sheet would look like to point out that this is a list of all the technical elements that Gracie Gold did in this particular competition. This, for example, is a jump. This is a triple Lutz, triple toe. You can earn, if you're a skater, 10.3 points for that skill if you do it correctly. If you do it super well, you get bonus points. So she earned an 11.6 for it. If you don't do it well, you get deducted and you might not get your 10.3 points. And so when a skater goes in, they sort of know what the base value of their program is. And if they skate really well, they can make it a bigger value. If they don't skate as well, it's going to go down. So it's still subjective and in terms of the bonus points you get. And they also have a part of the judging system where they give you subjective points for your skating skills, how well sort of fluidly you've put together your movements, how well your program goes to the music. So that part is obviously still in figure skating because it is a performance and a sport at the same time. So that they get added together. But the point is skaters are going to work on being sure they have a really high base value. So there's a lot more emphasis now since the loss of figures in the programs in the 90s to stack your program with the difficult elements. And the bigger points come, you're seeing them right here. These where we get the bigger points, those are all jumps. So there's been a huge emphasis since the 1990s on really being able to load your program with jumps and then being sure you can complete them well because there are set deductions if you don't. It's not just a judgment call. There are set deductions if you don't do specific parts of the jump correctly. This really changed the sport quite a bit in terms of how programs are put together and how skaters train. For me as a biomechanist, the consequence of this is that coaches are going to have skaters practicing their jumps more, and the more efficiently and the better arsenal a coach has in terms of knowledge of how the skill is done, anything they can do to help the knowledge they already have from being a coach and usually a former skater in terms of understanding the biomechanics is going to be helpful if we can use it to help the skater learn quicker so they can progress from a double to a triple to a quad more quickly or eliminate errors or master a skill. That's going to be helpful because this is going to be a bigger part of their program now. And we know particular things that they're going to get deducted for. The other important implication is that most of the skaters' training time is now spent on jump spins, lifts, and throws, less on just skating skills. And that means they spend more of their training time doing these repetitive motion skills where they're landing on one leg, on ice, on a steel blade, on a boot, and we see a lot of overuse injuries in skaters. So this has some implications for either their training and or design of equipment to try to reduce the overuse injuries they're doing. If we can do it, some with biomechanics, some with maybe strength and conditioning, possibly some with rules of figure skating. So what I study in particular are biomechanics of jumps. And I get asked all the time, will anybody do a quint? So a quint is going to be a 5-revolution jump. And this is just a quote from Carol Heiss-Jenkins. She coached Tim Gable, and this is back in 2000 when quads were really hitting the market in terms of probably every male skater really needed a quad to medal. And she said, I think Tim can do it. If anybody can do it, he can. I have no hesitation saying that whatsoever. And Tim probably at that time had 2 of the best quads that you certainly would see in the world. There was other people who were up there with him, but he was right there. And so what I did, just to give you an idea of, is there any chance we would see a quint, just to look at the progression of jumps over time. So single jumps were done back in 1880. I'll give you an idea of what an axle is versus a Lutz versus a flip in a second, because that'll be helpful too. But the point of this graph is just to show you some jumps it's taken a fairly long time to progress. So single axle was done in the 1880s. We didn't get to a triple axle until 1980, so it took 100 years to progress from a single to a double to a triple. And we still don't, we figure skaters are not yet doing quad axles. I'll explain why. But some other jumps, if we look at the toe loop, which is this blue line, a single toe loop was done in the 1920s. That was when it was first sort of invented. And then we actually don't have a record of when the double toe loop was done. There's some controversy over that, but it went a little more linearly. And we saw quad toe loops in the 1980s. That's only like a 60-year progression from single, double to triple to quad. The other jumps didn't take too long to go from single to double, double to triple took longer, triple to quad took longer. So to sequence, we're realistically looking, if we project these out, if it's physiologically or mechanically possible to do a quint, you're still looking at, certainly for the toe loop, probably not seeing it until maybe like 2020, which is pretty close, 2020s, but the others, 2040s or longer. So it's unlikely to see them soon, but if we physiologically could see them, there's certainly no reason we wouldn't be on this progression, but I wouldn't expect them to come, like you're not going to see one at the Olympics is my prediction. So I want to show a little bit of the biomechanics of skating jumps and why I do think we could progress out to a quint, but why we might not see it right away. So first, the reason the axle, the loop, and the Lutz and the other jumps are different. An axle is a forward takeoff jump. I'll just let this come around one more time so you can see it. So she's facing forward or sort of sideways when she takes off, but she lands backwards. And so if you watch a triple axle, you actually have to do 3.5 revolutions in the air to do a triple axle. And that's why we haven't seen a quad axle yet. It would actually take 4.5 revolutions to do that. If you compare that to a loop, this is an edge jump. The axle also took off an edge, but he takes off backwards. It's a little hard to tell, but he's going backwards. He takes off and he lands backwards. So a triple loop actually has 3 revolutions in it. And all the other jumps but the axle have 3 or slightly less revolutions in them if they're triple. The Lutz, the reason I picked that one to show you, it's most people would maybe consider it one of the hardest jumps that's done. It's a toe pick jump. So she taps her toe into the ice and vaults off that toe pick. So it's different than what you saw in the axle and the loop. And that makes some differences in how they're developing vertical velocity from a mechanical standpoint, how they're using their muscles, how they're developing rotation. And that makes some jumps easier or harder to do. And it's going to change how you're going to need to progress from single, double to triple and the types of errors you can pick up, which might make you fall. So what I have for you is just a picture of a triple axle. You don't see a lot of women actually doing triple axles, which is why I put this out there. That is sort of breakthrough skill for them. And so this is the takeoff right here. And then this is the landing over there. And she's sort of done 1 revolution by here, her second revolution by there, and her third revolution sort of in here, and then the half revolution coming down to land backwards. So what we look at in biomechanics is, I'm going to break down a jump in terms of projectile motion and angular momentum. And you don't need to know anything about physics to be able to sort of understand. I mean, biomechanics is all about physics, but hopefully I'm going to present this so that you don't know anything about physics. So what we want to look at, besides the balance point of figure skating, which is hugely important, from a technical standpoint of just being able to complete the triple axel and get 3.5 revolutions in the flight phase. So this is the flight phase right here. She needs to be able to figure out how to get her body turned around 3.5 times in the time that she has in the air from takeoff to landing. And so one thing that we are really interested in, it's a really basic question, is like sort of where should she put her resources in terms of the actual energy and her efforts into contracting her muscles to launch herself up into the air, but to also rotate and spin really fast. Is it sort of like a 50-50 split? If she wants to go from a double to triple, should she really work on jumping higher? And just does she do the rest of the movements the same way? Does she have to sort of increase her jump height and her rotation? If we could even know the answer to that fairly basic question, it can help the training progression for skaters on the ice, so they don't have to do as many repetitions. They can sort of master the jumps more quickly, then that's less pounding on their body and less possibility for injury and hopefully less falling. So the time in the air from here to here is going to totally depend on how high she jumps. So her height off the ice, and that height off the ice is determined pretty much entirely by the vertical velocity she has right at this instant. So all these movements coming here where she's gliding in and she's extending her leg and she's swinging her arms up and she's driving this other leg forward, that's helping her create vertical velocity. How the amount of vertical velocity she can get right here will determine her jump height. So this part here is the approach phase of the jump. And so in biomechanics, we want to study this part of the jump because it's going to be critical in determining how she's going to get vertical velocity. That will vary a little bit on the types of jumps I showed you, the toe pick jump, which was the Lutz that I showed you, versus the axle, which you're looking at now. Generally speaking, so in the axle, since it's what I chose to look at here, you will hear them talk about triple axel all the time in the Olympics. It's going to be for the men. You hear it over and over again. It's still one of the hardest jumps that you can do right now. And the few ladies who can do a triple axel, it's going to be a big deal if they landed in the Olympics. So some of the important things are the more forcefully she can extend her leg, the more power she can get, create force against the ice, and pop up off of the ice quickly, she'll get more velocity. One of the difficulties with this, besides the fact that you're skating on a slippery surface and have a really thin blade and all that type of stuff, is that generally we think of being quick and powerful to go with vertical jumps. And often we think of power in terms of, we think of strength training. You think of power in terms of your muscles being able to produce force and produce force quickly. So we think of getting our muscles really strong. And often we think of strength, we think of our muscles adding mass. So a bigger cross-sectional area or more girth or circumference to the leg. So you have more muscle mass. Muscle can produce more force. That's great, except for skaters don't want to increase their mass. It's not just because it looks nice to be thin and athletic looking, and it's a judge sport. They don't want to increase their mass because mass slows rotation. And they have this balance that they have to do between getting up in the air and rotating fast. So they need to know how to, particularly in their off-ice strength training, how to develop strength and force and quickness without bulking up. And so that takes it's absolutely doable. And people who are in strength and conditioning, we need to be sure our skaters, when they go identify a strength and conditioning coach, work with someone who understands the other parts of the biomechanics of skating that they really can't put on a lot of bulk, because that's going to explain the concepts later. But the more mass you have and the more girth or circumference you have, the size you have, you just physically cannot rotate your body as fast. That's why you see small gymnasts and small dancers and small divers and small figure skaters. Anything that has rotation in it, it helps to be small. Other thing that's going to be important about getting the vertical velocity is the arm swing and the leg swing coming through. We've done a lot of biomechanical studies, and we know that swinging your arms when you jump can help increase your jump height generally anywhere from like 10 to 20%. So that's going to get you more time in the air if you actually use your arms to help lift yourself up off the ice. But the skater also needs to use the arms to help create rotation. And they need to get from this position here, where they're swinging their leg through and their arms are still sort of driving up, to this position in here, which is a rotated position where the arms are together, legs are together down here, as quickly as possible. Because when they get in this position that she's in right now, and that she's in over here and here and here, this really tight position, it makes something called, we call it the moment of inertia. You don't need to necessarily know that name, but the small tight position where your limbs are just lined up as close together as possible lets you rotate faster. And that's why we don't want a lot of mass or a lot of size, because if you have a lot of mass and you have a lot of girth or size or you're bulky, even if you get your arms and legs close together, you are still a bigger person than someone who doesn't have that bulk. And just the tighter and narrower and skinnier that you can get, your length doesn't matter, it's your circumference and how much you actually mass you have that matters in terms of your rotation. So going from here to here, if she uses her arms and her legs to drive up more, which would help her get height, that means she has to go from a bigger position with her arms and legs spread really wide and come in really tight quicker, which is doesn't seem like that would be a big deal, but that takes a lot of strength too. And again, we need to have that strength without having bulk. So she can't necessarily drive her arms and legs out and up as much as she would like to get height, because she has to compromise with her ability to get them in and tight so she can pick her rotation up and snap and rotate really fast. So one thing we want to look at when we study the skaters who are doing the jumps, and a lot of the work I've done, we get skaters and they have them do singles, we have them do doubles, we have them do triples. We get skaters who aren't at the level of doing triples and look at their doubles and how do those doubles compare to skaters who can do triples, to try to see, are there anything in common that we know that we could give a coach and say, as you're progressing from a single to a double to triple, we really want the skater to keep the same amount of effort they're going into the jump height and try to add more rotation as opposed to adding effort into height. Other point to point out here, sorry, that was a little redundant, is that to rotate in the air, it's not just about getting your body in this narrow position. You also have to create something we call angular momentum. You need momentum to spin. So if any of you guys happen to be sitting in an office type chair right now, which spins, rotates, and so you can spin back and forth, you can't start spinning just by moving your arms and legs in. To get spinning, you have to push off of something. You could push with your feet on the floor to get yourself rotating. I could push off my desk and start myself rotating. I will probably knock all my keyboard and stuff over, so I'm not going to do it. She has to push off the ice to get rotating. So she does that two ways, I'm going to say, in an axle. When she glides in, she's gliding in on a curve, and coming in on a curve just naturally gives her rotation in the direction she's going to spin. So she's curving, I'm going to say, if we were watching her from the top, she's sort of curving, if you could imagine a clock, counterclockwise as she's going around. And she's also spinning counterclockwise in the air. So just her body coming in on the curve is going to give her some momentum to rotate in the jump. But the last part of the momentum is, look at the way her shoulders face here. Her shoulders are almost facing us, so her chest is facing us. And she's turning her body over her foot as she goes from here to here. She's turned maybe 90 degrees. That turn, as she's jumping up, gives her that momentum to rotate. And getting that momentum to rotate is going to be super important. The problem is it's a little harder to jump up and get that vertical velocity as you're also turning. So this is again where sort of a compromise comes in. Obviously, a lot of it's practice and technique and training your muscles, but some of it is you just can't put 100% effort into everything. She has to sort of split her efforts a little bit between jumping up and turning and getting that momentum for the rotation. So we sort of break a figure skating jump if we're only looking at completing 3.5 revolutions, or however many they need to complete in the air. We break it into sort of three things: her getting her vertical velocity, her getting her rotational momentum right here, and then her snap into the rotating position and how small she can get to rotate fast. Talk about needing to land after that. And just to show you a couple other people, this is also a triple axle. that he's doing, and this is a quad. So same skater doing a triple axel. I just sort of wanted to point out some of the differences. So coming up, driving his leg through, arms through, that's helping with his vertical velocity. The turn here, helping get angular momentum. Popping the arms into the tight rotating position is going to help with the rotation. So what we could notice if I flipped backwards, I don't think I will, but he gets into his rotating position a little earlier than she did. And that's going to be really important to help. So he's finished his jumps a little earlier so he can land a little more smoothly and softly and hopefully not have huge forces acting on him. So ideally, if you could get into this rotating position before the top of the jump, she got into it sort of at and after the top of the jump. That's one thing we really look at in the technique is where have they hit their rotating position. Other thing, if we go down here, this is a quad. This is a toe pick jump. He's putting his toe into the ice. He's vaulting off his toe. He has a whole different way of generating vertical velocity here. His velocity is really not going to come from his arm swing too much because he doesn't have that forward arm movement he can make like we would do in a regular jump. He still can press off his, I've lost my mouse, here we go, his leg to create force against the ice right here. So it goes from very bent to fairly straight. So he presses off this leg a little bit, but this leg is going to leave the ice. I don't know if you guys can tell, but he's actually on this foot. This leg is leaving ice that he's going to turn and it's going to drive through. So this leg he presses off of gives us some vertical, some vertical velocity here, but then he really needs to pick up some vertical velocity from vaulting off this foot. So what they do in skating is their speed they come in when this foot hits, that foot hitting sort of arrests the horizontal motion of the body, and it lets him sort of rotate up over that foot while he's pressing off the ice. So he gets velocity from pressing off the ice with this foot and rotating up and over that foot. And then he'll have a quick little extension of that toe. So it's a pretty different movement skill to create vertical velocity. He's still getting momentum the same way. He's still popping in tight. So what we look at in the quad, again, can they get their rotating position before they get to the top of the jump? And so he's definitely done that in the quad. He's hit it right here. His top of the jump is over here. So putting all that together, the way we sort of measure our variables, we use motion capture usually, or we use video cameras, and we turn our skaters into little stick figures or computer-generated graphics, and we measure things like their angular velocity or the height of the jump. So this is what some data might look like. This is data from the 90s, which is why the graphics aren't quite as good as you would expect from this day and age. And I'm just comparing in this graph a quad, which is in blue, to a triple, which is in red. And this is just showing the angular velocity. So I'm going to try to pause the person right maybe there. This is near takeoff. So this is that turning on the foot that I talked about, already getting some angular velocity. And then the quad, which is in blue, we're getting faster and faster angular velocity, which you'd expect. We expect you to rotate faster in a quad than a triple. What we really wanted to look at was not that you rotated faster, but is there a fairly equal balance in increasing your angular velocity as there is, say, an increasing your time in the air, or is it weighted more towards velocity and less towards time in the air, or vice versa? So we wanted to look more at the balance of how the skaters are putting their effort, or is it very individualistic? Maybe some skaters take a velocity route and some people angular velocity of the rotation route, and some skaters take more of a height and time in the air route. So is there anything consistent and helpful we can give back to skaters and coaches? Does it depend on their body type? Does it depend on, their strength or their flexibility? So if I could get it to go to the next slide. So that was, let me go back one, sorry, apologize. This graph over here is showing the height of the jump. So I'll try to pause it again somewhere like in this region. So he's sort of up near the top of the jump. Again, blue is the quad. This is a triple down here. It looks like he's jumping quite a bit higher. This was a male jumper, by the way. But when we actually, and some skaters will jump higher in the quads, when we actually look at sort of the percent gain in height here and how that much gains time, we actually find that they're gaining much more percent-wise gain in angular velocity and less of a percent gain in terms of height. Some skaters actually don't jump any higher from a triple to a quad, and I'll need to qualify that in a little bit. It might not be fair to expect a skater who can already do a quad. They could use the height they use in a quad in a triple if they want to, versus if we compare it to a skater who is trying to learn a quad, and that would probably be more important to look at. What is a skater who needs to learn a quad? how does their triple look and how do we need to get them to a quad? And there is an increase in height that they are going to need to get. It's just not as big as the increase in angular velocity they're going to need to figure out how to get. So the other sort of same type thing, let me get one along. This is looking at what we call a combination jump, or figure skaters call a combination jump. So she's going to do one jump, immediately land, tap her foot in, and do another jump. So there aren't extra steps in between. So this racks up more points. So skaters trained to do this, they can put all sorts of combinations of jumps together. And what I'm plotting here that I wanted you to look at is the second jump. So if we go along, this is how fast she's rotating. This is the first jump. And then she lands, and then she does a second jump. And this one right here, you're looking at a double for the second jump. She's rotating maybe 900 degrees per second. So that's doing, if I could do the math quickly in my head, which I can't, like not quite 3 revolutions a second. If we go down to this one, this is a triple that she did the second time, and you can watch it up here. She has a triple for the first jump. This one's a double for the second jump. This one's a triple for the second jump. I'm sorry, I can play that one more time. And we know she's going to rotate faster in the second jump when she does a triple. The question is sort of the pattern of how you get the rotation any different. That could be helpful in giving us information back to the coaches. And so what we can notice is from when she takes off for the second jump to when she gets into her rotating position, this would be when she's in her rotating position and just rotating as fast as she can in the air. This is when she's in the rotating position and rotating as fast as she can in the air. That the time, the slope here is pretty similar between the two. So when she's doing her triple, it's not that she's getting into her rotating position faster. She's just getting into a position where she can rotate faster. And that might be subtly different, but it's actually important to us. It means that she's not able to pick up her rotation speed by starting to rotate fast earlier. Like if she could go along and make this really almost straight up so she could, boom, instantaneously be rotating fast, that would let her get more rotations in quickly. So if you're going to try to do a quad or a quint, that's really helpful because you can start rotating fast over here. You don't have to wait till you get over here. And we don't, skaters absolutely are trying to increase this, but that's really, really hard. And that's an area where we can maybe pick up a little bit if skaters are trying to get their quint. This is going to be a lot of actually upper body strength training, which you don't necessarily think about in figure skating. But you need your arms to be strong because you need to get your arms in quickly to that rotating position. So it's not only a small rotating position, a really tight body position, but can you get there quickly? And that would really change the shape of this line right here. So we would like to be able to work with coaches and skaters on improving how quickly they can get into the rotating position without compromising their ability to jump high. And that's sort of a kicker, because the more you work on this, the harder it is to put effort into driving up and getting velocity with your arms off the ice, or even just extending your leg and exploding off the ice because you're also twisting at the same time. That's one reason it's going to make some jumps probably a little easier to maybe go to a quint in versus other jump types, ones where you're less likely to compromise your vertical velocity. So this is sort of just tells what we learned from the studies we did where we measured all these things on the skaters, that going from single to double to triple axels, we only see height increase about 10%. So absolutely they jump higher, but it's not a lot. This right here, this eye, that's their body position. They're changing their body position about 400% when they go from single, double to triple. I'm taking a little leeway in physics terms here, but the point is a huge change in body position that helps them with the rotation speed, not much change in height. This L, this is their rotational momentum. They do get more momentum. This is the turning they did on the ice before they took off. So about 20% here, so they use it. That's going to be helpful. But again, not as much as they're controlling their body position. So just from a standpoint, from a figure skating skill, this is a very consistent method they do. Keeping these the same, if you remember, and you might not, because I'm probably going super fast and I apologize. The height, I've lost my mouse again, here, and the momentum here is coming from their takeoff when they're still on the ice. If you make a lot of adaptations here, from single to double, triple, it's really making it like a whole new, potentially a whole new movement skill. The more you can keep these similar, the bottom one and the top one, that makes your approach and your into the takeoff much more consistent from jump to jump to jump. And then you can just worry about what you do in the air, which is the only thing you have control over in the air is your body position. And you can just focus on that to increase your rotation speed. So it makes a lot of sense in terms of consistency and being able to learn a jump and being able to progress from single to double, triple, that what you can have consistent from jump to jump to jump and just what's in flight changing your rotation speed. Problem is that's probably not going to get a quint out of the skaters. So it's going to make a quint really hard to do. We see a similar pattern when we just go from a triple to a quad. Obviously, they're not doing quad axles yet, so I don't have like that information for up here. But a triple, say a triple toe loop to a quad toe loop. A toe loop is just a toe pick jump. Height may increase 5 to 8%. Not a huge amount, a little less than obviously going from a single to a double to a triple. The body position is getting tighter and tighter, but only about 20%. So that tells us they might not have a lot of room to pick up more body position to make a quint. So, but that is still where the focus is. It's still sort of using the same strategy. And this is the momentum when they're turning off the ice, only about 7% from a triple to a quad. So that might be an area where you could try to get them to get more momentum if we want to go to a quint. But generally, this is what we see over and over and over again. The strategy figure skaters are using are to keep that takeoff part sort of the same within the same type of jump, but as they add rotations and do the adding rotation in the air, just from the movements in the air, not from their movements before they get off the ice. So this has some strength and conditioning implications. Again, I mentioned one of them already, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it again. It would be going from here to this tight position here. Strength training to do that. You're in the air. You're not pushing off the ice anymore. It is muscles that aren't trained necessarily a whole lot in other sports. She's really using a lot of her adductor muscles. And for those of you, I don't know where I am in my webcam because I closed it, so I can't see it. I know you guys can see it. It's taking your arms out to in. So having her up and coming in is some adduction strength. It's not a motion that necessarily we often train pushing motions or pulling motions. This is going to have a little bit of a pulling motion. So she goes up with her arms and needs to pull them in. So doing that pull in motion and doing the adductor motions. So having a strength and conditioning coach, so our exercise specialists who understand the sport of figure skating and know what's really going to be specific training for the skaters and doing this without bulking up. It's going to be important. Same with the leg. The takeoff leg, that's the same explosive type movement you need in any type of jumping skill. But the other leg, which is swinging out and then needs to snap in, that's a hip adductor primarily to squeeze your legs in really tight. And that's not a motion that a lot of us train in other sports. Certainly we could think of some other sports that train it. But again, for our strength specialists to know what skaters need to do to be able to perform the skills of this level of difficulty is going to be really important. The other thing is, and I'm sure all of you have experienced this, not only does she need to get into this position, she needs to hold it. So if anybody's ever been on a merry-go-round or playground or tire swing, or you spin in circles on a swing, it feels like your arms and legs are being thrown out of the circle and they just want to fly off and go in a straight line. And you're trying to hold into a tight position so you can keep spinning really fast because you were a little kid and you like to get dizzy. She's got that problem. When she's up in the air, we have something called conservation of momentum. Your body keeps wanting to go in a straight line. So people call this a centrifugal force. It's going to feel like there's a force pulling her limbs out. It's not actually like there's a gravitational field pulling her limbs out or anything. It's just that they want to keep moving in a straight line. So she has to use her muscles to create a force to resist that. And that's really hard. It doesn't even take spinning super fast on a tire swing or anything. That you can barely use, depending how strong you are, your muscles enough to hold your limbs in. So training those muscles not only to get into that position, but to stay in that position is really hard. You can see the expression on like her face and the expression on her face. They're just like trying to squeeze in tight and hold that as much as they can. And their elbows tend to fly out because they're really concentrating on squeezing their hands into their chest. They really need to concentrate on squeezing their elbows into their chest too. That'll make them spin faster. Really concentrate on having the legs straight and squeezed together. So this leg didn't quite get all the way straight. She could go a little faster if she straightened it out. Now you don't want to spin too fast in the air and over-rotate your jump and fall. But if they're trying to go from a triple to a quad or a double to a triple, mastering those little bitty things, which you might not see when a skater, if you don't pause the video, It's really going to make a difference in getting around. So I'm going to let you watch this video, and then if it's a good time to pause for questions, we can, or I can keep going. But this is a girl from back in the late 90s who was trying to learn a triple axel. And she's really close. And I'm going to let you watch it. And I don't know if people want to type in the answer to the question of what would she need to work on based on what everything I just told you to get a triple axel. You can see she doesn't quite get enough revolution. Hopefully it'll play. It's not high quality because it was taken back in the 90s, and I lowered the resolution to make it fit in the video. But I'll just play it again. So obviously she doesn't make it around. You might not be able to tell, but she actually lands facing forward, so she's half a revolution short. So I am going to let you guys watch that a few times, and hopefully people are typing in answers to things of what they think she could focus on, like what's the strength of her jump and where does she need to try to pick up to her extra half rotation. What could she do with her mechanics or her technique? So we'll let you watch that again. And while we're doing that, one more time. So hopefully you've all typed in some really cool answers there. I am going to go on maybe just like 5 more minutes, and I'll call it a halt if that's good. Question is, will we see a quint? So this is a person doing a quad. This is Brian Joubert. He's a French skater. It's going to play in slow motion. And so what I have in the little table for you, a whole bunch of numbers, so don't go crazy if you're not a number person. If you are a number person, you can just memorize all these to your heart's content, is how much extra degrees of rotation. So if you want to do a quint, technically speaking, you need to pick up 360 degrees, a full revolution. So if he increased his height 10%, he would pick up 85 degrees. If he increased his height 20%, he'd get 140 degrees. That's his body position. If he got 10% tighter in the air, he would get 110 degrees. If he got 20% tighter in the air, he would get 220 degrees. That's getting close to what we need. H, this is that momentum from the twisting off the ice while he's still in takeoff. If he could increase that 10%, he'd get 110 degrees, 20%, 220 degrees. Maybe you don't just focus on one. Again, most skaters focus primarily here. I'm going to tell you why that's not going to give us a quint. If you could do both, the twisting off the ice and the body position, only 10%, you'd get 220 degrees. If you could do the body position and the turning off the ice 10% better, better is not really the right word, but 10% more, I'm just going to say, you could increase your height 5%, you get 270 degrees. And that is probably enough to land a quint. A skater might not get full credit from a judging panel standpoint of doing a quint with 270 degrees because you might actually be a little short at takeoff and landing. Might not really be all the way around, but you could still probably land it as in you wouldn't fall. And so that is probably what we would see with the first quints. We might see that they over-rotate a little bit at takeoff and a little under-rotated at landing. It might not technically be a quint from a do you get the full credit judging panel, but it would be the start of what a quint is that people would be putting in their programs, say at the Olympics, for example. If you only have the ability to increase all of them 5%, you're only going to get 160 degrees, and that is not going to get you a quint. So I want to pause him. I'm going to take him up and pause him in the top, and then once we do that, and I tell you a few more things, I can stop. And we won't maybe do the landing forces on the body, which is probably really cool for those of you who are in sports medicine and want to talk about injuries and the boot and the impact forces. But if you have questions on those, I'll answer them. But we're going to pause him if I can near the top, right there. So we know that skaters rely a lot on body position in the air to rotate faster. So the only way he could get 10% more rotational speed or and get more degrees around, so he could do a quint, would be if he can actually get his body any smaller. And by that, I mean, could his elbow be a little closer to his body so they don't stick out as much? The answer is yes, a little bit. It's not perfect right now, but he's already fairly tight. His wrists and his hands are tight against his chest, so he can't pick up anything there. But he could probably get his elbows in just a tiny bit. His feet are right next to each other. He has a tiny little gap here. He could straighten, push down sort of with his legs in the air and try to make himself longer. So these would snap together and be tighter. He could get a slightly better body position. but he can only get so small. The only other thing you can do to get smaller is decrease your mass and like your girth of your muscles, but you don't want to get weak. So assuming he's going to stay the same mass and the same girth, he can probably only pick up 5 to 10% of moment inertia and never do any more than that just because of the physical dimensions of the body. So the strategy of decreasing your moment inertia, skaters are almost already there, that they can't get that much tighter in the air. They only have about 5 to 10% room for improvement. So they're going to have to do something when they're still on the ice to get more height or get more angular momentum to get that fifth revolution in. While they're doing that, though, they're going to still have to be able to get this body position as quickly as they can and hold it to landing. So my prediction is that yes, somebody eventually will be able to do a quint because they can get a tad, theoretically speaking, you could get a little tad tighter in the air and pick up 5 or 10% here. But it's got to be someone who can do that while they're probably getting an extra 5% higher. That's going to mean they're going to have to get more vertical velocity and explode off the ice a little more. At the same time, they pick up a little extra rotational momentum off the ice. So probably if they could do 5 to 10% here, maybe 5% of height, 10% more angular momentum, and they could. It's going to mean the timing and the movement patterns here are going to change a little bit. They're really going to have to work on their strength conditioning training in here and the actual technique that they press off the ice as they're turning. But physiologically, in terms of muscle force and technique, I do think it is within the human possibility to do that, particularly if they pick a jump where you're vaulting off your leg, so that as you vault off your leg, the way you're producing your vertical velocity is less likely to be compromising the rotational part of the jump. So it's going to also be picking sort of the right type of jump to be practicing the quint with. But it's going to be hard. So I'm going to say, yes, it is physically possible that a skater could eventually do a quint, but we're really reaching the limits of, with the current equipment and the rules of skating, that would probably be it. You couldn't just keep progressing forever, and primarily because we have this limitation of the body position. Certainly there's some room to increase height. There's some room to increase the angular momentum, but the body position is really a limiting factor in our rotational skills here. Without really changing the sport in terms of can you use boots with springs in them and things like that. So I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Dr. King. That was great. We're going to open it up for some questions. If you are remote and you have a question for Dr. King, please go ahead and type it into the question area. And we'll see if anyone here in the room has a question to get us started. I have a question.
Hi, this is Gretchen at the national office. So with all that you've been kind of talking about, would it be reasonable to say that the first quint might come from a male skater who is smaller in stature, but very strong? So we know the women are already incredibly petite, but the men tend to be a little bit taller. So would a smaller male skater that has more strength, would that be the type of skater, like physically, that we'd be looking for?
Yes, that's a really good question. So the actual height of the skater is not going to be as important, because if they're long, about sort of this axis of rotation, but don't stick out in circumference, it's not too bad. But what generally goes with height is if you're taller, you tend to have more mass, and just having mass can slow you down too. So someone who, I think who we would see a quint from, certainly being petite and strong is absolutely going to help, because you're going to have good relative strength. So for your body size, you have more strength, so it's going to be easy to get into position. You're going to have a small moment inertia. So the quick answer is yes. The other thing is going to be, if we went and we look at the people who have quads, who have a fairly high quad, so they already have the height and they already have the ability to do a quad, then they might not need to sort of work on the height. And if we can just get the rotation speed from them, which again is going to be that body position and that angular momentum, that might be easier than a person who's already at sort of a really fast rotator but has a low quad. Is getting the height without compromising the rotation just seems to be a harder thing to learn. So it's not like the physical abilities aren't there, but it's a harder thing to learn. But certainly a larger skater is probably going to have a much harder time getting a quint than a small skater who has really good relative strength.
Great, thank you. We have, let's see. So Dave going to ask, and then we have Robin, and then we have some coming in from afar.
This is Dave at the National Center. I was just curious, especially in training, what are some common types of injuries that you see in people who are training?
I missed the last part of that.
What are some common, like when in training, what are some common injuries that skaters will have?
So skaters, in terms of injuries that we see from figure skaters, and I don't know if this is surprising or not, if they get, obviously they get the injuries from falling, like broken bones, they get ankle sprains, they get concussions, that type of thing. But they have a fairly high rate of overuse injuries. I actually have a slide somewhere I can jump to. Just sort of repetitive loading injuries. Whoops, there we were. So single skaters, this is a survey from junior elite single skaters, 70% had overuse injuries. Pair skaters, pairs have throws and catches and stuff in it. They tend to get more acute injuries. The overuse injuries that single skaters tend to get are lower leg, metatarsal stress fractures. Stress fractures are huge, but also jumper's knee is a problem, tendinitis, Achilles tendinitis, telatendinitis, tibial stress fractures. So primarily, I would say knee down is more common. You do see some hip injuries as well, but it's really the stress fractures and tendinitises are big.
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna, Dr. King, I'm gonna ask a question that came in from one of our attendees who is listening remotely. One person has a question about when skaters put one or both of their arms over the head when they do their jump to increase their score. Can you talk about that? Is it more difficult? Are the forces different, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So that would be, we could just take her. If you do see this all the time, it's more difficult. So you would take one of these arms and put it up overhead. So once you're in the position where your arm's over your head, it's a good rotating position because your arm's in line with the center line of your body. So you can still rotate fast. It's the two things that, well, probably more than two things that is changing. The movement from the takeoff to the arm overhead, you have a period of time where it's not as easy to rotate fast. So during this time period here, it's sort of interrupting the rotation speed a little bit because your arm's sticking out a little more as it goes up overhead, and that slows you down a little bit. The other part, which I didn't talk about at all, is I talked about sort of the rotational momentum, about the way they're spinning, but you can see, and you'll see this in all skaters who land their jumps, she's tilted a little backwards in the air. And you need to be tilted backwards so when you land, you're going to stay in a balanced position and glide out. When you throw your arm up over your head, throwing sounding probably not quite, it's an actually controlled movement skill, but it and the swing leg coming through can have you change your tilt in the air because they start the motions while they're on the ice, and they can pick up extra rotation, so they end up too backwards or too straight, and then you can get your rotations completed, but you're out of balance when you land. So one of the difficulties with the arm over the head is that it's changing your momentum and your lean as you're coming off the ice, and it can make it hard to keep that angle that you're wanting to. It's affecting your ability to sort of keep that angle that you want to and land smoothly.
Great, thank you. One of our staff members has a question.
So this is Robin Stewart. I have a follow-up question to Gretchen's having to do with morphology. So Elvis Stoico, I remember, was a really short, stocky guy who was one of the first to do a quad.
Absolutely.
And it seems like his body type doesn't follow some of those rules that you were talking about. So you could just talk a little bit about his success, and then I have a question about female figure skaters and the female athlete triad. So
sure. So absolutely, there are always, you can do a lot with the body type you have. So if you're a little shorter, he was really broad in the shoulders, really developed muscles. He was a really powerful jumper. So his jumps, not that he didn't spin fast, he did, but his style of jump was relying a little more on height. It actually makes your jump look fantastically huge and fast, and you're likely to get, your bonus points because it looks so incredibly easy and difficult at the same time. It's like, wow, the person just jumped so high, they're going so fast, they landed their jump, it's elegant, it's smooth. So he's had this sort of explosive part. So he was really masterful at the height and the time in the air. And if you have that, you might not need to get as tight a body position and rotate as fast because you're making up for it in height. So there are different strategies that you can use, based on your body type. Most skaters tend to be really good rotators and tend to be on the smaller side. They're still jumping, fairly high. We can see she jumped high. But he sort of was on the other end of the spectrum. So there will be a spectrum of body types that work.
Thanks. And then the question about the female athlete triad. So, if skaters and coaches are aware that mass and moment of inertia can, contribute to their ability to complete rotations, then it's my understanding the female athlete triad is not uncommon. So what are your thoughts on, how you can work with a female figure skater, either to select the right ones to begin with or to prevent, stress fracture injuries and obviously going down that route?
Yeah, it's a big problem, obviously, gymnastics, figure skating. So they know that, and then there's also just the body image as well. But I think, and some of it's probably going to be education, but while they don't want a lot of mass, they still need to be strong. Or they can't perform the skills. So it's the individual skills they need to have the strength and power for, and also doing these skills over the course of a 4.5-minute program of skating. So knowing that you need to be able to skate your 4.5-minute program, you need to be able to be explosive off the ice and jump, 10 maximum jumps of the course of your 4.5-minute programs. You need to be able to have the strength to hold your arms up, and letting skaters know that, you need your nutrition and your energy sources to, not just for the strength, but to have your strong bones and to complete the program, and that you can participate in strength training without getting bulky. So that it's not, we don't want them thin, we don't want them weak, we want them to have strong muscles. We just don't want them to have extraordinarily bulky muscles. And so I think it's education that's going to go on there, and they're absolutely, they can have good nutrition and they can have a good strength program. And it's just knowing that, like, what you see in popular press of strength training and people bulking up is not what has to be done to actually get strength, that it can be done correctly for figure skating. So I really think it's just the knowledge out to the coaches and the skaters.
Thank you so much, Dr. King. We are going to wrap up for now so that people can get back to their busy schedules. We really appreciate your time today. I think we're all going to watch the Winter Games with a different eye, and we'll feel more informed, and we'll be looking for height and velocity and takeoffs and landings. Armchair biomechanist now. So thank you so much. We're going to disconnect now, but thanks again. We really appreciate your time.